Loaning to friends. The quiet weight of trust. There is an unspoken solemnity in the act of loaning something to a friend, not the casual kind. An extra pen, a forgotten hoodie, but the kind that carries real weight, money, a car, a space to sleep, a favor that costs time or effort or energy to fulfill. These loans are never just exchanges of material or logistical goods. They are acts of trust, tethered invisibly to the soul of the giver. At the core of a loan is a paradox. On one hand, the giver must possess something in order to give it. On the other, they must loosen their grip enough to allow the other to walk away with it. Not a gift, not a handoff, a temporary passing offered with faith in the eventual return. This is what distinguishes loan from gift, the intention of return. What makes the act so human is not the item or the terms, but the very risk embedded in it. The one who loans something says, "I believe you will remember. I believe you will carry this weight with care. I believe you will not disappear." It is in effect an investment, not in the item's return, but in the friend's character, and that is where it hurts most. Because a loan is not a legal contract, not in the way friendships function. It's not enforced by fine print, courtrooms, or collection agents. It's enforced by conscience, by the shared understanding that this world works, in part because people keep their word. A loan tests the moral architecture of both people involved. The one who gives takes a chance. The one who receives inherits a responsibility. But the structure of that responsibility is fragile. Sometimes the borrower forgets. Sometimes they remember and don't know how to return without shame. Sometimes they grow quiet, vanish into new obligations, or carry guilt like a brick in the mouth, unable to speak because the shame is too loud. And sometimes, more painfully, they simply decide not to care. That's when the transaction turns heavy. The thing is no longer about the money, or the gas, or the jacket. It's about the fracture between two people, an invisible crack in the road they once walked together. The lender begins to ask hard questions. Was this person ever who I thought they were? Did they understand what I gave them? Or worse, did they take my kindness for weakness? Trust once given is rarely given the same way again. When a friend fails to return what was loaned, not just physically, but spiritually, it forces a reckoning, not just about the item, but about the very meaning of relationship. Because behind the act of lending is often a silent hope that this person, this moment, will prove that human beings are capable of holding one another up. Instead, what's left is a hollow spot, and it echoes. The hollow spot left by the absence of return is rarely just about the object or money. It becomes something else entirely, a lesson, a scar, a small yet steady redefinition of what friendship can and cannot be trusted to bear. Because now, the lender is forced into a strange and solitary place. Not angry, necessarily. Not at first, but disappointed. Resigned. A little colder, maybe. Because the item wasn't just a loan, it was a bridge. A test. A whispered question. Will you carry this and return it, proving we are made of something strong? And when the answer is no, or worse, silence, that test becomes a verdict. There is a dignity in lending. It is quiet but powerful. It says, I have enough to share, and I trust you enough to share it with. To betray that, intentionally or by neglect, is to insult more than the act. It's to betray the dignity itself. Still, the world is messy. People stumble. Life doesn't always permit timely repayments or perfect follow-through. Sometimes emergencies eclipse intentions. Sometimes the borrower meant to do right but lost the means, or the courage, or the way back. And here, too, the lender is tested, not only in patience but in discernment. Because there is a line between grace and gullibility, and it is razor thin. To forgive a debt, truly forgive it, is not the same as pretending it never existed. It is to acknowledge its weight, its meaning, and then let it go without expectation. But that is an advanced maneuver, spiritually speaking. It cannot be faked. If it is not real, it will rot inside the chest of the one who tries. The bitterness will leak out in sighs and silences and withheld warmth. Yet the alternative, living with resentment, is a worse poison. So what then? What becomes of the friend who does not return what was loaned? And what becomes of the one who gave? Here, everything turns on the soul of the lender. The pain of being let down can become a seed. It can grow into wisdom or bitterness or both. But if handled properly, it becomes a kind of knowing, the knowledge of who to trust and how deeply, the knowledge of one's own boundaries, the knowledge of how to give without becoming emptied. Not all loans are mistakes. Not all failures are betrayals. But all moments like these, when a trust goes unanswered, are invitations to reckon with what friendship really is, what it is built on, what it cannot survive. Friendship at its best is not a ledger, but it is not immune to balance. Too many forgotten returns, too many quiet withdrawals, and the account begins to dry up. No formal confrontation is needed. The warmth just fades. The calls go unanswered. The bridge, once offered so freely, is never rebuilt. Some friendships do not recover from a loan unpaid, not because of greed, but because of clarity. The borrower may believe nothing has changed, but the lender knows something has. Trust is not a mood, it is a structure. And when weight is added and not removed, the structure bears the damage. There is also shame, unspoken but thick. The borrower often avoids the lender not out of malice, but discomfort, embarrassment, guilt, and the lender, in turn, is left not only without the object or money, but without the closeness that once made the lending feel natural. Now the friendship itself feels like a thing on loan, taken but not returned, and so, quietly, relationships die. Yet here, too, is a kind of teaching, because sometimes what is borrowed is not a thing, but the story, the belief, the assumption that we are the kind of friends who do right by each other. When that story is punctured by a missing payment, a never-returned item, the story itself is tested. And if it cannot stand, then perhaps it was only ever fiction. The wisest learn to give without blindness. They lend what they can afford to lose. They do not invest sacred things in untested hands. They do not confuse generosity with obligation. And when something is taken and not returned, they do not chase. They grieve, and then they decide. They decide whether to ask, whether to forgive, whether to rebuild, or whether to mark the line and step no closer. None of this makes the act of lending wrong. It only makes it real. Trust is a real thing. Time is a real thing. Money, even if abstract, binds people with real tension. And so, to lend is to risk. And to risk is to believe. And when belief is broken, it must be faced with clarity, not cruelty, but clarity. In the end, every loan to a friend is a quiet question whispered in a shared language. Are we what I think we are? And the answer may not come in words. It may come in silence, or delay, or a call months later, with a shaky voice and a returned item and a real apology. But the lesson remains. Not bitter, not sweet, just true.